Okay, let's all just take a deep breath. In the long, horrifying, and deeply disturbing saga of Jeffrey Epstein, just when you think the bar for human decency cannot possibly go any lower, someone grabs a shovel. This week, that person was apparently Megyn Kelly. I know, we're all exhausted by the endless cycle of revelations, the names, the lists, and the sickening details. But what we're not, and should never be, is numb to it. And thank goodness for people like Bill Maher, who are still here to call out the absolute insanity when they see it. Because what Megyn Kelly said this week wasn't just a hot take. It wasn't just a different perspective. It was, frankly, one of the most chilling attempts to minimize and sanitize the actions of a monster that I have ever heard. And Bill Maher, on his show Real Time, was having absolutely none of it. He didn't just disagree, he brutally dismantled her comments with the sheer, blinding force of common sense. If you missed it, let's get into what happened, because it's a masterclass in moral depravity meeting moral clarity. The comment that made us all sick. First, let's set the stage. On the Megyn Kelly show, the host decided to share some inside information about the convicted sex trafficker. I do know somebody very, very close to this case who is in a position to know virtually everything, Kelly began, already setting up a defense based on an anonymous source. And this person has told me from the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. I'm sorry, what? My brain screeched to a halt right there. Not a pedophile. This is the man whose entire horrific enterprise was built on the abuse of underage girls. But wait, it gets so much worse. Kelly continued, this is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls. Let that sink in. She is making a distinction. She is creating a sliding scale of acceptable child abuse. I'm just giving you facts, she added, as if this was a weather report. That he wasn't into, like, 8-year-olds. But he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. My stomach is turning. The casual, clinical, legalistic way she discusses this, as if she's debating a tax code, is beyond belief. She is arguing, on behalf of an insider, that because his victims were 15 and not 8, we should, what? Reclassify him, give him a different label. She is describing predators grooming victims to look legal. She is, in real time, explaining the mechanics of his monstrous operation as a defense of him. It's an argument so morally bankrupt it's hard to even process. Bill Maher says, hold my drink, enter Bill Maher. On Friday's Real Time, Maher was already deep in the weeds of the week's political chaos, first quoting from some of the newly released Epstein emails. Here are some of the lines we heard from this week. Maher started, reading aloud. I'm the one able to take him down. The dog that hasn't barked is Trump. I know how dirty Donald is. Maher paused, letting the weight of the words land, before adding, I mean, it's like from a Sherlock Holmes book. Then, he turned his sights directly on Kelly, and he did not hold back. He summarized her argument with the sarcastic disgust it deserved. When Megyn Kelly said this week, well, Epstein wasn't technically a pedophile, because they were like 15 instead of 5. He let the audience laugh, a sound of pure disbelief. Maher then delivered the knockout punch, perfectly articulating what we were all screaming at our screens. When that's where your defenders are going, let's be easy on the pedophiles and not to cast aspersions on people who go out with 15-year-olds. Boom, that's it. That's the whole ballgame. His guests, CNN's Fareed Zakaria and podcaster Josh Barro, just erupted in laughter. It wasn't a haha, that's funny laugh. It was a this is the most absurd timeline imaginable laugh. It was the only human response possible. Maher himself was left temporarily speechless after summarizing Kelly's take. He just looked at his guests, hands up, and said, I don't know. And that I don't know said everything. It was the shared, universal feeling of what has happened to our brains. How did we get to a place where a major media personality is spending her time defending Jeffrey Epstein's specific preferences in victims? The diet pedophilia takedown. Maher wasn't the only one left speechless by Kelly's comments. Over on The Daily Show, correspondent Josh Johnson also took aim, and his description might be the most horribly perfect summary of all. How the hell was Megyn Kelly ever an attorney? Johnson asked, bewildered. Then he went into a mock courtroom defense that was painfully close to what Kelly was actually doing. Your Honor, my client only engaged in diet pedophilia. Diet pedophilia, that's exactly what it is. It's the zero-sugar version of a crime that is 100% poison. Johnson, channeling all of our frustration, continued, Ma'am, everyone knows there's a big difference between a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. But everyone also knows there is never a good reason to be talking about that difference. Thank you. This is the point. This isn't a legal debate. This is a human one. The moment you start splitting hairs on which children are better or worse to abuse, you have lost the plot. You've lost your soul. The political vultures circling, Maher, in his signature style, connected this moral rot back to the wider political circus, specifically pivoting to Donald Trump and his most vocal supporters. He seemed to be painting a picture of total moral chaos. He brought in Lauren Boebert to the Situation Room. Because they got a situation, Maher quipped. He then listed off a trio of Trump's biggest defenders, Boebert, Nancy Mace, who's been here before, and Nancy Mace is a victim of sexual abuse, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, three of his biggest fans politically. But women. His point was sharp and painful. They understand about this stuff, like we can never, and they do not want to give the Epstein investigation up. Maher seemed to be highlighting the profound, stomach-churning hypocrisy. How can this group, especially women, and particularly a self-proclaimed victim of abuse like Mace, stand so steadfastly by a man who is so deeply entangled in the Epstein files? How can they watch this unfold and not run for the hills? This scandal isn't just about Epstein anymore. It's about who is willing to look the other way. It's about who is willing to make excuses. Maher wrapped up by pointing out that this was, all around, the single worst week for the president and his administration. Between threatening a government shutdown, attacking SNAP benefits for the poor, and the constant drip of the Epstein files, the armor is showing cracks. He looked like he didn't care to a lot of people whether they ate or not, Maher said, summarizing the political fallout. But it was his guest, Fareed Zakaria, who offered the most telling, and perhaps hopeful, observation. He suggested that this, the Epstein connection, might finally be the thing that pierces the MAGA bubble. For so long, it seemed as though there was nothing Trump could do that would affect his base, Zakaria noted. It seems that there's at least cracks, maybe the beginnings of some tremors. We can only hope, because if defending a man who preyed on 15-year-old girls isn't a deal-breaker, then what is? This isn't about politics. It's not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. It's about protecting children. And as Bill Maher and Josh Johnson so clearly pointed out, the moment you start trying to defend the indefensible, you've already lost.